This is How to Think.
We live?
And we are live.
Hey everybody, welcome to How to Think, the show where we take amazing people who have achieved something incredible in life and we deep dive into what makes their brain tick and understand what makes people successful upstairs. So today we have an amazing guest on, Mr. Eli Wilde. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Nice to see you again.
I've been waiting to get you on here forever.
Yeah.
So real quick intro for those that may not have heard of you. First of all, you're one of the most effective and just completely proficient speakers and communicators I've ever met in my freaking life.
I'll take that. Thank you.
I mean, it's just insane how articulate you are and how influential your words can be. And that makes a lot of sense because you were the #1 salesperson for Tony Robbins. Yep. You was like 3,300 seminars you did for him?
I 3,400 while working for him, but I did a lot during that same time outside of his organization.
Wow.
So I've done
like thousands and thousands of talks you've done.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So we're going to get into that, but I have a question that I want to ask you first before we jump in.
Awesome.
All right. I'm sitting here with almost Superman. You were almost Superman. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and that's what kind of started my journey. And I mentioned like I won't mention her name, but I got to connect with a lot of famous people when I first got to Los Angeles. I grew up small town in Maryland, went to school, moved to Colorado, and this girl that I had been dating in Maryland had moved to California, Los Angeles, and we lost contact. And we broke up, and she wasn't talking to me, which is whatever. And I end up going out. I'm in Los Angeles, and I go out to a party, and this guy, this homosexual man, is coming up to me, hitting on me, and he's very clear that he's hitting on me. And I'm like, oh, let's have the girlfriend drink, the girlfriend sandwich. He's like, why'd you move to LA? I'm like, the girlfriend. So I bring up the word girlfriend like 100 times. And he's like, kind of not getting it. And he's like, oh, where from? I was like, from DC. He goes, oh, me too. And he's like, where'd your girlfriend go to school? I was like, American, me too. Everything was like, me too. I'm like, all right, dude. And he goes, what was her name? And I said her name, and you should have seen his eyes. He's like, oh my God. They were best friends. So this is 2002.
Now you're talking to him, right?
And so we're connected. And he's like, that was my best friend in college. Can you please connect us? So I connect them, and the three of us become like best friends. And his name's Paul Nelson, and he works for Mosaic. They manage like Jim Carrey, a lot of big time talent. One of his main guys back then was Tom Welling, who was Superman on the TV show Smallville. Oh. When the Superman Returns movie came out in 2004, his guy got turned down for it. And because we had become so close, he said, Eli, have you thought about acting? I think you'd be great for this. And they screen tested me, script, all that stuff. And it turns out, obviously I needed some stuff to work on. And for most people listening, you probably heard yourself for the first time on like a voicemail, and you hear your own voice and you're like, oh my God, I sound terrible. And you're reading scripts, and when you're doing it on camera class, like if you're insecure, you can see it in the eyes. And if somebody says something to you and you don't know your line, there's just all this insecurity across your face. And when they do an on-screen test, the camera's on your face like this, like it's zeroed in. So you can read every insecurity and emotion on your face. And they were, kind of breaking me down. They're like, yeah, you need to work on this, this, and this. And here's where that's coming from. And I was like, this is fascinating, but it also is really uncomfortable. And I eventually kind of fell in love with it. But during that time, I had a job selling dental products. And it got to a point during all these kind of screen tests where Paul said, you're going to have, kind of have to quit your job and take this full on now. And I wasn't ready to make the leap. And so I quit showing up for auditions, classes, everything for the training. And he called me like 1,000 times. They're like, you're making the biggest mistake. But I felt like I was being responsible and playing safe. And years later, the movie came out and it wasn't very good. And I thought, I was like, wow, that could have been me. And maybe it wouldn't have.
You're talking about with Brandon Ruth, right? Yeah, it was all right.
It's okay, yeah, it's like, it wasn't very memorable. They did one, they didn't do multiple.
I was actually a lot happier with him than I was with who they chose for Lois Lane. I was like, I don't get this Lois Lane. It didn't make sense.
I don't even remember. It wasn't a very, it was Kevin Spacey. It was like, it could have been great.
He was good.
He's always good.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing. So, fast forward, I get out of debt. I'm still working at this dental job. I'm not very happy. I have money for the first time. I'm miserable. And this question was like, when that movie came out, why didn't I go for it? Why do some people who don't have a lot of talent become very successful. And some people that have lots of talent, and I'd meet all these great looking people in Los Angeles, very talented, but they're 35 and waiting my table, or they're, or they have all this talent, but they're doing drugs all the time. And I really got obsessed with how do people become who they become. And so I was curious. I was like, well, obviously I don't believe in myself enough to go for it. I'm lacking self-esteem and self-confidence. And so I started reading all these books on it. And a lot of it was principle-based and some therapeutic gestalt. I was listening to self-hypnosis every night, kind of like I'm confident, I'm powerful, doing all these affirmations, and it didn't really work. And I found something called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I was talking about it with this man I was working at Trader Joe's, this awesome guy. And he's like, well, you should check out Tony Robbins. And I was like, who's Tony Robbins? And so I got the book and slowly became obsessed with that body of work and didn't want to let it go. And so I harassed Tony's company until they gave me a job.
Wow. Well, that's one way to get in. Jeez, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And you know what's funny? I'm watching you right now, and I'm looking at your face, and you kind of do have a Superman vibe. And look at the camera. Look at the freaking camera. He's got the curl. Look, Brandon, look at that. He's got the curl. Look at that.
I woke up like this.
That was not even intentional, was it?
Yeah.
We definitely need to get the camera more front facing on him. I just realized like everything's a side profile, but here I'm gonna sit this way so people can see us both a little bit better. There we go.
There you go.
So all right. So you didn't want to, and what was deep down the biggest reason that you think why you didn't really want to pursue that, and that didn't call to you?
Well, at the time it did, but I was scared. And if I had to do all over again, a lot of times I think I would like to have been an actor. But if I could choose between that and being super famous and what I'm doing now, I definitely would choose this. But I loved the looking at scripts, writing out the backstory, like how does this person think? No kind of, but I was really thinking like, as you create a character, like if this person had 5 brothers or if they had 2 sisters. And there was this TV show that as a child I was obsessed with. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Quantum Leap.
Oh, dude, yes. Yeah. Are you kidding me? With Scott Bakula?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Quantum Leap was the show. Oh, it was
Wednesday
amazing.
Nights, it would come on after my bedtime. I'd sneak downstairs and I'd watch this. And we had like I had a really kind of challenging childhood. A lot of abuse in a lot of ways, sexual abuse, like uncomfortable, weird kid. I was voted the quietest kid in high school. So I was really awkward, really weird. Later on in high school, I kind of grew out of some things, but I remember just hating my life, hating my situation, hating myself, hated everything about how I looked, how I sounded. I just had all this fear and anxiety and stress in my life, and I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. And so I would sneak downstairs and I would watch that show. And it was so real for me. I remember watching it, and I'd watch how this person would he would become a new person. And I remember going to bed at night for years, and as I'd wake up in the morning, so for some of you don't know the show, Sam would wake up as another person in another reality. He might be like a boxer in the middle of a ring, or this black woman who was raped, or this thing, and he's like there to right some wrong. And he'd wake up, after the first 5 minutes of the show, he'd be in this experience, and he'd go over to a mirror and he'd see his new face as this other person. And I would wake up in the morning for years, and this is when I really feel like I began to cultivate my mindset and my imagination, because I would lay there, I'd feel myself wake up, but I would imagine myself as a different person in a different time. Maybe I had brothers or sisters, or I was 7 foot tall, or I was like a midget, or like how would people perceive me? What would my mindset be? And I'd lay there and I'd kind of daydream for 20 minutes before I start my day. And it was so real for me. When I walked over to the mirror in my bedroom, I opened my eyes and I looked at the mirror, and I was always surprised to see my own face, because it was so real for me, those circumstances. And and Einstein says that imagination is more important than intelligence. And I feel like with my challenging my challenging childhood, like having these stories and living into these imaginary circumstances that became real for me is a lot of what leadership is. You have a vision of something that doesn't exist. Like Steve Jobs, they call these people visionaries because they see something so clearly that nobody else can see. And if you can see yourself as that, or your situation, or people, or see the good in people, even when they're being mean, you can see through their mask, and you can look in the mirror and see behind your own mask. And I just became fascinated with people and characters in these shows. And I find that in my real life, everybody's a character, everybody's playing a part, everybody's playing a role. And we've all got this amazing potential inside of us, but sometimes we have patterns of thought, feeling, behavior that become habitual, that lock us into an identity that maybe we picked up from our parents or from a circumstance, and it's no longer serving us. And so how do we play a new role. And so I'm always just fascinated with people, how they become who they become. And I think that's been one of my superpowers in selling, is because I'm genuinely curious about people, and I know that even if somebody who's like having a bad day, it's like if somebody's mean, that's not who they are, that's who they've become. And who they've become has been learned. And they've learned a process of thinking, often to protect themselves or their time or something or their ego. And it can lock somebody in, it take them in a path where they're no longer fulfilled or they feel like they're really evolving. And I think that's just part of the human condition. And so I'm just always curious about how do we reverse engineer that, find the genesis of where this person created a belief about themselves or people or the world, that created their model of the world, how they interact with people, everything from their posture to their eye contact to how they get pleasure or, experience pain. What's really driving some human being? And after a certain amount of time, you realize that we're all kind of the same. We're all screwed up. We're all insecure. We're all crazy. And, and so I can't feel superior to anybody, and I can't feel that anybody's superior to me. And I can just connect with this person as a friend, even though they don't want to be my friend. And so I can just be genuine in that because we're all screwed up. So, yeah.
Wow. I'll be your friend, Eli.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. We are friends.
So yes, we are. I love bringing my friends on this show because it's, so much more comfortable sometimes when I really know somebody. And we've talked about this a lot with your journey, and the amount of, if you were to say in dollars, like the amount of, because you would go out, you would sell like UPWs and stuff for Tony, and plus you did other things. The sheer amount of dollars that you've closed from stage is in the millions, right? What I want to know from you is, how did you go from somebody who got an audition to be Superman, and you honestly, you had a shot, and you let fear rule your ability to pursue that? But then I can't imagine you weren't scared when it came to getting a job with Tony. How did you sort of make that shift where the fear stopped you from taking action with the Superman role, but it didn't stop you from taking action? Or what did you change to prevent it from stopping you from taking action with getting a job with Tony?
It's interesting because I actually learned a lot from the Tony Robbins event, and I was really kind of in a funk. I didn't go for the acting thing, and I ended up quitting my job, as this dental person, because I was really frustrated, just not very happy, and I decided to travel for a bit. I went to Australia, came back, and I just became obsessed with everything, because I was like, and I think we all reach a point where we realize like we've got a standard that's been breached within ourselves, and we're tolerating something, and we get to that threshold of pain. And some people in their relationship, they're like, all right, this has been annoying, and then they're like, one day I've had it, I've quit, I'm done. Like, I'm over this. And I think that one of the things that these books and these programs and Tony personally inspired in me is to raise my standard as to what I was tolerating within myself. And so I was like, this fear, this nagging, this conversation about myself, about people, it's making me play life so small. I think, and for some people, it's time. They realize they're getting older. This time is not finite. Like, I'm tolerating this about myself, and they decide to make a change. Most people don't. It just becomes their pattern, becomes the direction their life moves in, and that direction takes them to a destination and therefore their destiny. And so we got to really look at the direction that we're going with our diet, our communication with ourselves and others, and really look at how do I make some changes and condition myself to show up more powerfully. And for me, that time off work was really great, and I learned a lot about myself. But I started reading all these books, and then I got this Tony book, and it talked about the emotions, not just the principles. And so it really spoke to me. And I saw like, a month later, I was walking by this frozen yogurt place I liked, and I saw this magazine said Learning Annex. It's kind of like Success Resources today, huge seminar company. They're based out of California. They pretty much went out of business because it was really poorly run. But it was Tony Robbins speaking, Susie Orman, Donald Trump, a few other people, like some famous athletes, Magic Johnson, and it was $97. And that was still like a lot for me to spend on something I was getting. Right. I got Tony's book for 86 cents off eBay or something, plus $4 shipping. I didn't spend money on anything. I was really frugal. And so spending $97, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. It's the most I'd ever spent on anything self-development, period. Like, I never spent more than $10 on a book. And I go to this thing, and it's kind of cheesy, no money down real estate guy, get rich quick guy, Donald Trump, who is, he was the main thing. But then Tony comes out. He's supposed to speak for 2.5 hours, speaks for 4, and he's like,
as Tony does.
yeah. And he's like, if you got anything out of these effing 4 hours, change, spend 4 days with me, I'll change your effing life, or I'll give your effing money back, step the F up, like go back to the room. And I'm just like, he was so certain. And I was in the cheap seats, and Tony's like 6'7", but he looked about like a dot from so far away. There was about like 30,000 people in the room, but I felt him, and I jumping up and down, all the rah stuff that people hate. I was loving it, but I was really locked into a box, and I hadn't been like, connecting with people. And I think that happens to a lot of people. Some people hate it. You're hugging people and, hugging strangers and all this shit. Like, this is fine.
Yeah, I'm not, I love Tony, but I'm not a fan of that part.
Yeah.
I'm going to be transparent.
I was loving it though. And at the end, he said, go to the back. And it was $900 for a UPW ticket, but it was $800 if you signed up that day. And I usually don't even tell this part of the story, but when I went back there, I saw the salespeople, a bunch of people talking about success. They were hard closing people. There were guys wearing $80 suits, wearing $30 shoes, talking about success and trying to hard close people at this little booth. And I went over there, and I couldn't sign up, but it was a 2-day event. I couldn't sleep that night. Tony said things that just stuck in my mind. And so I signed up the next day, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did. But I knew, it was like, if I don't do this thing, I am going to regret it. And he said some things, and I was like, I'm just going to do this thing. And so I went to the event, obviously. So many things. I could tell you so many stories about what happened for me at that event, things I learned, things that distinctions I got from my life. And I decided I didn't want to let it go. So very long story short, I got some names. I called the company over 200 times in a period of less than 2 weeks. And I eventually get an interview. I drive down there, and I'm all like in state, doing incantations the whole way. I'm like screaming in my car. I'm just like fired up. And I get down there, and they kind of take the entire staff, and they put them there to watch you. So they gave me a 28-page script when I went down. It says, come back in 2 weeks, don't F this up. And it was this guy, Lester Favish. And the guy, Gene McNaughton, was the VP of sales, amazing guy. They said, come back in 2 weeks, don't mess this up. And when you came back in, I delivered this script, and they have people, they're kind of messing with you a little bit, looking at their phone, whatever, being bored, to see how it's going to affect your confidence. But I was ready. Also, I had some acting experience too. So I had
You're just acting confident.
Yeah, and I was like I looked at this thing, and I'm like, I'm going to own this. It's interesting. I'll never forget that day, being at Tony's company, and Tony's so amazing. And I thought if I was part of this world, I'd be drinking green juice all day. Like, everybody's talking about affirmations and changing the world. But I went to his company, people outside smoking cigarettes, people were overweight, people were clearly broke. And, he was very removed for the company. Then he's since stepped back in, and it's a different environment now. They cut a lot of fat. But I was like a little bit disappointed, and I was like, I'm going to take it upon myself to make sure that I raise the standard for this company. And there's so much I'll cut out just for brevity's sake. When I saw Tony at that first event, UPW, I was so blown away by what he said. And he talked about that book, Think and Grow Rich. We're talking about thinking, talk about a book to help people with their thinking. That one was a phenomenal book for me. But I realized I hadn't really applied a lot of the principles. And so on the first day, we took a lunch break. And I go outside, and I'm eating my 2 cans of Tongal tuna with packets of mayonnaise and mustard, because I was broke, used all my money for this seminar. And I'm eating this tuna, and inside my backpack was that book, Think and Grow Rich, that he had talked about, what it had done for him at a very young age. And I open up the book, and I read in the first story. It's a story on desire, and it's about Edward C. Barnes, a man living in railway cars in Orange, New Jersey, living as a bum, hears about this man who's changing the world with his mind, a guy named Thomas Edison. And so he makes a pact with himself that he's going to be partners with the great Thomas Edison. And he works and works and works, and there's a whole story there. If you guys want to read it, definitely worth it. And he becomes this partner. And I was reminded of that story as I'm sitting there, and I read that story as I'm sitting there on that first lunch break. And I thought to myself, I've been living like a bum. I think of Tony Robbins as this guy who's changing the world with his mind. And I wrote down in my workbook that day, I'm going to be partners with Tony Robbins. Fast forward a few weeks, I'm working there. Fast forward maybe 8 months. If you ask anybody in the company who's the best speaker, everybody said me. And I was really good. And I did very well. And so Tony's son, Jarek, who used to live here, he's in Puerto Rico now, wanted to join the company and be a speaker. And so Tony said, you need to work your way up just like me, like I did with Jim Rohn. Do these meetings. It's very tough. It's not easy, but you learn these skills. And who you surround yourself with is who you become. So you need to be around somebody who's hungry. So you need to live with the top sales guy, who happened to be me. Next thing I know, before I know it, I'm living with Tony's son. And Jarek was so nice to me. If his father gave him advice, he would let me listen to like these audio clips that his father would tell him, do this, don't do that. Here's how you can think. And it was like this most sage wisdom. And Jarek would let me listen. And some of it would just like bring a tear to my eye and inspire me. And if Tony said jump, I said how high. I applied the next day. And, fast. He was segueing out of live events. So we were selling something called digital delivery. We called it TNT, Tony Not There. So essentially you pay a couple $1,000 to go to a movie theater, and they give you audio programs and coaching and all that. But you go to a movie theater and you're sitting there watching a movie of Tony, and there's coaches and stuff like that. And they facilitate these like 100-person, 200-person events. So it's more hands-on, more intimate, but TNT, Tony Not There. And so, because he was segueing out. So that was the future of the company. So he brings us all in. I'm living with Jarek, and there's about 30 salespeople there, and Tony's doing a full-on 2-day training of the future of the company and what it looks like, how we're getting paid, the structure, the standards, everything. He lays it all out, and he's like mid-sentence as he's writing some things on the board, and he turns around, and he looks right at me, right in the eyes, and he says, I want you to know something very important right now. If you're in this room, you are my partner. And he looks at me right in the eyes as he says it, and I go home that night, and I take out my workbook from UPW. It was 1 year later to the day that I wrote down, I will be partners with Tony Robbins. I was like, holy moly, how cool is that? And so, I was just really all about it, and I just lived and breathed all of it. And I figured there's so many mentors out there, but if you're going to follow somebody, I was like, this is my dude. And I'm all about this guy. And so I didn't really read a lot of other stuff for the better part of a decade. Like, we talked about some of his programs. I know that stuff like that. I mean, I just listened to Tony every single day for years. And then I did seminars based on his principle. I averaged 2 seminars a day for a decade. And so just a lot of reps. And I figured like you're supposed to kind of outgrow your mentors. But a lot of the audios that people hear, and even UPW, he created that at 22 years old. And so when I got to know him more, there was so much more content. And you're supposed to kind of outgrow your mentors. But I mean, this guy's working 15, 16-hour days on stage, and then does a whole nother work day off stage, like 7 days a week. He's a savage. And so he's really raised the standard for me in every area of my life, and he's become like a second father. It was cool at the Funnel Hacking Live. He's there. And
I saw him come up to you and shake your hand and give you a hug. That was cool.
It was cool because he only acknowledged Russell Brunson. And maybe one other person, because he's in his flow.
Yeah.
And I saw him make eye contact with me from the stage, and he's like in his flow, and he's got like a moment, and he comes over and hugs me, in front of everybody. It's really cool because I've not talked to him for about a year. I still, a little bit of text, but we've not like really interacted much. But his brother-in-law, part of the reason I'm connected with Tony is because as I live with Jarek, his brother-in-law Scott joined the company, and now pretty much runs the company, and the three of us were doing stuff all together. Scott's one of my best friends, and Scott completely changed my life. My relationship with Tony is only possible because of Scott, because Scott liked me so much and talked to Tony about me and talked to his sister, Tony's wife, about me. So Scott Humphrey is every bit as much of a friend and mentor to me as Tony is. So Scott really changed my life. So, but the point of that is, it takes a team.
Yeah. And
there was a lot of people that supported me in the Tony world that allowed me to get on some of those big stages and make the money. And I'm super competitive. Anybody that knows me really well, like I love people, but I always want to win. And I'll tell them exactly what I'm doing to beat them, but I'm still going to beat you. And I think that's good. I love that Jim Rohn quote. I forget what book it's in. It's like one of these audiobooks that he has. He says, we actually learn more. Like I want you to learn, and we actually learn more by losing than by winning. And so I am willing to give you that opportunity. And so he's always like, I'm going to win because he knew the law of averages, and he knows that it's just a matter of time. Jim Rohn was pretty savage himself.
Let me ask you a question, because this is something I would really like to know from you, because you're one of the most pleasant and positive people I know. And I don't know if you've always been that way, but I'm glad you said no, because it gives other people like me hope. But the moment I knew Tony was the real deal was actually, and I always knew he was the real deal, but the real moment was when I was at FHL at that conference, and I saw the guy's cell phone went off because I had heard from some people that, had been around him or been around the organization that years ago, if you were in his organization and he was doing a live show and somebody messed up, right? He would get like really, really angry. And I never knew if it was true or not, because, people say shit like you don't know if they're lying or whatever. And he would get really angry. And I understood that as somebody who's an entrepreneur. And, you know, you want your product to be amazing. You want the people involved to get the best possible experience. And so you can really take it personally when your staff or your team don't perform. You like, I was listening to an audio tape. I bought some of his audio tapes, and I heard him say, that, like literally admit that on the tape, that he used to be really bad about that. And then he said, like, one day he woke up and realized that it was incongruent with his message, because he's like, wait a minute, I'm teaching all these people how to be balanced and how to be understanding and how to, you know, be, how to influence people. But then I'm like really not doing that with my staff. And so that was his, you know, moment to change and work on himself in that aspect. And then when I was at this last conference and I saw him, there was a guy right next to him. I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was a guy right next to him, and his walkie-talkie went off.
Right behind him.
Yeah, he didn't have it muted.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, here we go. I wonder if he's gonna like blow up at him or whatever. And but no, he turned around to him and he like made a joke about it. He like made it a part of the show, and he made it fun. Yeah. And I was like, wow. I was like that, and it just, you know, because let me be real. I'm gonna be real with you. Have you ever gone online? Because social media these days, it can be super toxic, right? Especially if you're an influencer. You do one thing wrong, you say one thing, you have one bad day, and everybody just completely crucifies you because they hold you to this insane standard that they don't hold normal people to, and they don't hold themselves to, because you're supposed to be an influencer, or you're trying to be an influencer, right? And so, you know, you have all these people out there that will say you shouldn't do, and they'll give you this rap sheet, this list of things you shouldn't do. But then they go and they do all of them. Yeah. And everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? Like they 100% do. So to see somebody as big as him actually make that change, it gives hope, because I have never met a single entrepreneur that never got frustrated, had a bad day, made millions of dollars, and still one day felt like they hadn't accomplished anything and that it was all by luck, got pissed off and yelled at their staff. And if anybody and if any of them tell you that they haven't, they're full of shit, they're liars. And so my question to you is, you are so balanced, so positive, you have such an amazing disposition. Did you always have that, or was that something that took massive development, and how did that journey go?
Definitely. I mean, as I said, voted like the quietest kid in school. They put me in classes in elementary school, basically with mentally handicapped kids, because I was so like, I probably would have been labeled autistic by today's standards. I was like I just couldn't function. I couldn't communicate. And even as I got to, like, in school, I had a big gap in my teeth right here. And so I was really insecure about my mouth. So I mumbled a lot. I didn't want to open my mouth. It was very hard to get me to communicate. There was just so much fear in me. So it's been a constant process, but it's been relationships. It's been working on it, like literally working on myself so much. And, you know, for me, one of the things that's driven me, and this is, I think, something common in very successful people, is a lot of like repressed anger. And I think Tony at a young age had it. Elon Musk, there's certain people, I think what drives them to work so hard is this anger, is this drive. It's like, you know, something's not right. There's like a fuel there. And really, like, very successful people that work 15, 16, 18, 20 hours a day, there's really usually only one emotion that can keep that kind of energy. It's like a rage that just pushes them. And even they've proven there's a tightness in the body that produces more ATP. So anger is a fuel, you know, but it can also burn you out. So it can, you know, you can use it or it can use you. And for me, there was a lot of anger. I'd snap all the time, and I took Ritalin for a long time. I was a mess, and a lot of things changed in my life. I don't know if you know, like, my story of my mom and kind of what we went through, and then how things changed for us.
I do. I was actually going to ask you that, because I did look up a bit of that, and it was a rough story to read. You know, I'd love you to explain the first 10 years of your life, because I think a lot of people watching this or listening to this right now may think, wow, this guy's amazing. He was able to do all these things and get over his fears and you know, call 200, like, who would call 200 times and not give up after 4 or 5 calls? And so I think a lot of people may think that people like you are born like that. And I don't believe that's true. I believe they're made. And so I would love for you to describe the first 10 years of your life, because I think a lot of people would be shocked to see where you came from and then how far you've come. And I think it would inspire them.
Well, I'll break it down like this. We had just really challenging upbringing. I was born when I was 2. My dad got put in a wheelchair from a car accident. And we really struggled. A lot of challenges in the home. My mom just took me when we left when I was probably about 5 or 6. Moved all around a lot. She worked places like McDonald's. And so we were not super wealthy people at all. And she ended up getting a job at a country club, I think when I was around like middle school. And I remember after school, she'd pick me up and I was kind of just hanging out until she got off work at the country club. And I was wearing the hand-me-down clothes of the wealthy kids. So they kind of made fun of me and all of that. But, by the time I got into high school, I started growing out of it a little bit. And I had friends for the first time in my life. Probably my sophomore year of high school is when I started playing football. It was the first time I ever had friends. And had been really lonely before that, finally felt connected, finally had a sense of meaning. But that year also, my mom had her worst financial year. We lived on like nothing. And some other friends, they all had more money than us, and they knew it, and they kind of helped me out. If we went to eat somewhere after, they'd usually like buy me the burger or something like that. I just really great people who were like, some of them, like they were like also the cool kids, and I'm like kind of hanging out with the cool kids and, and athletes and things like that. And girls are noticing me the first time. And I come home this one night, my mom has a talk with me, and we're pretty much down to like our last dollars. And she's like, you're going to have to move with your father. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was kind of a somber tone. And the next day, I wanted to talk to my best friend about it. His name's Dave Scarano. And I was telling him about specifically what was going on, but I was like, man, I guess I, wanted to reframe my mind as positive. I was like, man, if you could drive any car in the world, what would it be? We're just talking about our dreams. We're like a Camaro, like a 1992 Camaro, like our dream car. If you could date any girl, what would it be? Just like talking about our dreams. And my mom comes home from work that night, and this woman who's been so challenged by life, so beat down, just robbed of all self-confidence, and just really just emotionally distraught almost every night. Like you just put through the ringer. So emotionally exhausted and frustrated and angry and with her own challenges. She comes home this one night as I'm talking to Dave on the phone, and she's beaming. She walks upstairs, and she's just got this whole radiance about her, the way her shoulders, her eye contact, her voice, so connected. And she looks at me, and she goes, Eli, when you get off the phone, I need to talk to you about something. And she smiles, and she turns, and she walks out the room. And David's on the phone. He's like, what could it be? What could it be? I was like, I don't know. And maybe it's this, that. And it was just, we bickered back and forth for about 2 minutes, like 13-year-old girls. Like, could it be this or that? And I said, I got to go downstairs. And I go downstairs, and our living room, dining room, and kitchen are pretty much all one room, because that's when you're living in a not very nice place. Everything is kind of just together like that. And, not like a loft, not meant to be that way, just, by the limited design choices. And my mom's sitting there at our little dining room table, and she tells me to sit down. And I remember she put her hand on my knee, and she just got very emotional, and she started talking about our dreams and our challenges and everything that she had hoped for me in her life and all of her dreams. And, she's like, and this happened and that happened. And she's like rambling at this point. And part of me is thinking like, wow, this woman has finally gone insane. Like, man, I'm going to have to lock this woman up. Yeah. And she looks at me right then in my eyes, and she goes, my prayers have been answered, and it's all because of you. All because you're meant for so much more. It's like, what are you talking about? She goes, I just won $7 million in the lottery. You're going to go to school. I'm going to go to school. Like, we're going to do this. And I'm like, what? It's like, so it's such a magical moment. And, we hugged and we're crying and all these things. And, the other part of it is she gave away most of the money. And so we weren't like,
hold up a little bit, back up.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. Let's reel it back. You're telling me that you grew up in this incredibly challenging environment.
Mm-hmm.
Your father, you were what, 2 when he got in a wheelchair?
Yep.
Yeah, 2. Incredibly challenging environment, not rich at all, pretty much a one room house.
We had upstairs. We each had our own bedrooms. All that
okay,
stuff,
well that's yeah. But you didn't have like a big house or anything.
No.
You weren't balling, and your mom wins the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Not like a $1.2 million, like $7 million. That's a lot.
And for us, it was like, might as well have been a billion. You know,
Right.
It's like everything.
But I noticed something. The first thing that she said was, I'm going to go to school and you're not, I'm going to buy a Rolls Royce. It was, I'm going to go to school and you're going to go to school.
Yeah.
And then she gave most of the money away.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who'd she give it away to?
She used to play the lottery with a lot of friends, and so she still felt obligated to give them money, which was not a smart move. Some of them questionable characters in some of them. And so I think she was even kind of manipulated into that looking back.
But I mean, even to just know where her heart was, like what kind of.
That was the first thing I said to her. I was like, "You sure?" She's like, "Well, at least I'll go to heaven." You know, that's mom.
You don't sound too excited about it. I'm like, what a sweet woman, and you're like, yeah, I was.
You know, it's like some people I think are givers by default. And it's her character. She is that way. But also, I think, and you and I have talked about this too. You have all these demands being placed upon you. And you got to take care of yourself. It's like a cheesy analogy. People say when you have, like when you're on the plane and they talk about the air mask going down, you put it on yourself first before your child.
Right.
But my mom's definitely somebody who's kind of would martyr herself and do things for others more than herself. She's always been that way. And she's very sweet. She's very sweet. But that's something I learned early because I was that way. I'm a chronic people pleaser, do too much. But then I find that when I do it, I'd resent those people. I'm angry at those people. I'm frustrated at those people. And I'm like, wow, that's trying to be like, who am I actually giving to them for? Am I doing it to buy into this story? Like, well, I'm a good person, or like, how do I even make sure like we have some clear boundaries in our relationship for each other? You know, it's like, so how do I be responsible for that in a way that's framed in their best interest all the time? How do I deal with this conflict where they have this desire and I do, and maybe I've not been clear? And so I'm always thinking through that because for years I'd do all these things just like she did. But I found like I'd get really angry and I'd ruin relationships because of it. And so, yeah.
That's heavy, man.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah, I was almost down a rabbit hole, but yeah, 'cause you asked me about,
good. Yeah.
You asked me about like, have I always been this way? I feel like I've made every mistake from like not even know having to speak and all of that. Because the first thing I did want though, like for myself, I mentioned I had this big gap in my teeth and I mumbled so much. So the first thing I wanted financially, I wanted braces. So my senior year of high school, I get braces, and I've got braces, like all my pictures and all that stuff. I'm smiling, you know, like this, you know, just like I'm always closed mouth. And after I got the braces off, I had pretty nice teeth. I drink way too much coffee now, and I'm not taking care of them.
Yeah, me too.
And all that stuff. So they're like brown now, but. And I'm not. I don't care that much, even though you should care about your teeth.
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
So it's funny because it's amazing how some people have certain categorical things that they struggle with, and other people it just comes naturally to them. Like I've sort of, in a way, had it's weird. I struggle with it sometimes, but I've in a way. Always had a easier time not caring what people think about certain things. Like I have 2 chips in my teeth, and I've got them from just forgetting to put my mouth guard in jiu-jitsu, just stupid stuff. And I've got them fixed before, but the thing fell out, and I just don't like the alternatives of. They have to like grind your teeth down and stuff.
I got a chip here, and they were like, they have to like grind it down to a nub and put a veneer on there, and just like, I don't want to deal with it.
I've gotten like I've had so many people on like social media like, Dad, please fix your teeth, and I know that they're completely unaware of their rudeness, or they're just doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
I almost respect the people that do it on purpose more, because at least they're doing it with intention, and the other ones are doing it out of ignorance. Yeah. But it's never really bothered me, But I just find it amazing how like that will come naturally to me, where whatever, I don't care what they think. But then like something else, like being able to control my frustration over something not getting done right or something, is much more challenging, and then other people might be completely and utterly patient with everyone, but then they're crippled by things like imposter syndrome and just what people think about them. I just find that fascinating, how some of us can really have superpowers in one area and kryptonite in another. No pun intended.
But that's the nature of human beings, and we've all got that somewhere. Could be in our relationship with our kids, or this person, or that, or like we've all got something, and that's what makes us human. That's what makes a superhero human. And that's how we relate to the character, the perfect superhero. Nobody wants to watch that movie because they're not relatable. And that's, we're all flawed, which is, which is good and bad. And you should have a desire to always better yourself. But, I'm always curious, like, what drives people.
And do you think that that core fundamental belief that basically, in a nutshell, we're all messed up is the first thing you have to like realize in order to get through to someone? Because, I've realized, especially after just deep studying on leadership and talking to you as well as listening to some Tony stuff, is that when you try to like influence someone and you try to like, or even just connect with someone, if you come in from a place of judgment, it's very difficult to influence them because when someone feels judged. And the other thing is like, I would say some people, it doesn't bother them as much. Like I personally have been able to take advice from people when I feel judged, if I have a very, very, very high amount of respect for them. If I don't have a very high amount of respect for them, then no. But, I find it fascinating how it really is a predetermined factor on how you can get through to somebody is coming. And it's also a skill to not come off as judgmental, because sometimes you don't think you're coming off as judgmental, but you really are, at least to them. And I think that's an art. And how would you say that really plays into not just influence, but even sales?
Yeah.
How many times have you heard a salesperson just completely like ruin their chances of making a sale because they start judging the person on the phone, or they start judging the person they're trying to sell to, and basically trying to have an intellectual argument with them rather than trying to get through to them?
Yeah, there's about 9 months into somebody's selling careers, usually when they'll hit a slump. And in the book Spin Selling, they talk about this. Rackman is the guy's last name. It says that people, after they get really good, they'll often hit a massive slump. And it's usually because they've taken so many of a certain call that they do completely understand the prospect's problems. But because of that, they start making assumptions, and their assumptions are actually correct. They're like, oh, yeah, it sounds like, yeah, hold up, you got this, this, and this. So they understand the problem, but the prospect needs to understand that you understand. So as Stephen Covey says, first seek to understand, then to be understood. But the other part of that is they have to actually understand that you understand. So as we're seeking to understand, like, yeah, I understand. And we're all wanting to save time. And when I see somebody who's stressed out, especially somebody successful who's got a lot of stress, what driving all stress is fear. And it could be a fear like, this person's taking a long time. You're literally stealing from my life, my time with my kids, and all that pressure builds up. Like, I've got all these things and I can't listen to you jibber jabber. Like, let's get to it. And sometimes we get short. And so sometimes we need to find creative ways to bypass that, where somebody says, okay, well, just humor me for one moment. And if I can be humorous and maybe say something a little bit like this and ask for permission, I can begin to bypass a lot of that if the person feels cared for. And, I'll never forget, because I've done the same presentation for Tony about 3,400 times, and I'd probably done this thing like 1,500, 2,000, a lot. And, I was doing this presentation. It was in a banquet hall with a bunch of round tables, which is the worst, because if you got a seminar, everybody should be kind of looking at you, like square tables. Round tables, that means half the audience has
their back to you. Yeah.
And so I'm doing this thing at my whiteboard, I'm talking, I'm in my flow, and I'm doing the thing, and I'm pumping everybody up, and I got this energy and everything. And some people just, weren't really engaged with me at all, which would make me like, now I've learned ways to, I can get everybody to tune in. I can change my tonality, or I'll do these priming.
Can you give us an example?
If there's one thing that you guys get, it is this. Here's $1 million tip. Guys, what is it? It's $1 million tip. You better freaking pay attention to this. So it's like people, whatever. Or, and we just did this at a seminar. I did a seminar with Chase Hughes, who's brilliant, top negotiator, FBI, military guy, like amazing, watching people's blink rates and seeing like this, someone becomes more suggestible. This part of their eye will start to relax, and their breathing rate will change. And sometimes I can just change my tonality. I'm talking in not a monotone, but kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, this sage wisdom type thing, which is really nice to listen to. And then sometimes I can tap into a warrior or the lover, where I slow things down. And I did all this research where I would ask people, at what point in my presentation did you really think you were going to buy? And it was never the close. They were like, man, it was in the middle when you slowed down, you looked at me and you said that. And I was like, wow, there's these magic moments in sales, and information doesn't change our lives. Experiences do. And if I can provide an experience a connection with somebody on a deep level where they feel heard and seen. And I can do that. And the words don't even matter that much, but they'll feel an energy. They'll feel this charisma. They'll feel this care, this concern, this certainty, this belief communicated to them very clear. And I could talk about Disney World. I could talk about Fiji water. I could talk about anything like this, but it becomes dynamic. And when you listen to somebody like a Bill Clinton, like a lot of his stories, he's talking about like opening a jar or where was this thing? And, and it's just, you're captivated listening to this man. And he's talking about nothing. You're like, he's just so warm. And, and I talked to you about this, there's the belief. So I'm always thinking like when somebody has amazing results, what are the actions that drove it? So what are they doing? Okay, but what are the decisions they committed to drive the actions? What are the thoughts and feelings? So two people can make the same decision, take the same action, still get different results. So what are the thoughts and feelings, the emotion, the energy that's driving their actions? And so everything we do or don't do, we do for desire to gain pleasure, avoid pain. So is this pleasurable? Is this painful? Well, that's dependent upon a belief system. What do I believe? What does this mean? And I love that book, Man's Search for Meaning. Human beings are meaning-making machines. So nothing has any meaning except for the meaning that we give it. And so if somebody's being challenging, do I make it mean they're being rude to me? If somebody's being challenging in my seminar, does it make it mean like about myself? Am I boring? Am I stupid? Do they not like me? These are disempowering meanings. So I wouldn't invest my energy in it. I can always reframe, well, this just means I need to change some things. This means I get to have some fun. This means something in the moment that I can play with. So I've established a belief system about people, myself, the life, the moment, that empowers me to keep on going and figure some things out. And I get playful and curious in that moment. And I use my imagination and I unpack it. And because I've got this belief, this feeling of certainty, and this is another Tonyism, when two people meet, the person's more certain will influence the other person. And I know why I'm there. I did an event a couple years ago with Jordan Belfort, and people were like, are you, and it was like thousands, maybe 1,100 people. And people were like, are you scared? I was like, I thought for a moment, I was so prepared. I was like, they were like, are you scared? I thought for a second, I was like, oh no. I said, if anybody's scared, they should be scared. I'm the only one in the freaking room that knows what's going to be talked about. I'm the only one in the entire room that knows what's going to happen. If anybody should be uncertain, it's them. And I remember like legitimately thinking that, and I was excited. I was like really excited. And it was one of the first times I was on stage with a big name like that. And I wanted, also me being very competitive, I wanted to really own that audience, and I did. And as people came up to me, like, man, I much rather, and Jordan's amazing, but next to me and him, it was like, he didn't stand a chance. And I was like, wow, here's where I get, but for him also, I was engaged. It was, he'd done it like 1,000 times. And for me, I'm like hungry and going at, so I've got more to prove at the same time. So I was more prepared, but it's just that drive in the moment, that belief about what it is. And as I was alluding to, it's this belief about people in the moment, this empowering model of the world that I've worked on and created and conditioned and definitely messed up on. And so I've reviewed my own performance many times. So, okay, what created that tension in the moment, and listening to my own calls, other people's calls, because we can't just be woo-woo with this, like getting to the science. And I shared with you the triad of Tony.
Yeah. Yes, you did. Yes.
I can
focus, language, and
focus, language, and meaning, and then physiology.
Right. That's right.
And so that's why in sales, like even my own presentation or whatever, I could hear somebody else's call, and they get an objection, and I could tell they usually missed some key moment earlier on where they didn't probe deep enough, which created the uncertainty on it. So I'm like, that's where you missed the call. But also, people were like, well, how do I deal with that objection at the end? And I could say, here's how I would do it. Here's what I would say. Here's something I might say. And I teach somebody the exact words. And they'd use the same words, and they wouldn't be able to turn it around in a situation where I could with the same words. So I was like, maybe it's not the words. Maybe it's this energy. And if I give somebody the same words, they use my words, but because of the meaning they attached to that person, themselves, or whatever, the meaning and their focus, going self-conscious, disempowering meaning, they use the words, but there's a slight tension in their throat, or this tenseness, and they say the same words, but with fear and frustration and hesitation in their voice, and the person doesn't respond to the words, they respond to the energy, the emotion, the energy and motion. So they're responding energetically to your state. And so to be in a state, so I think of myself, if you look at like a Tony or Michael Jordan or any peak performer, like they're in this state of like, it's like
psyched up.
I wouldn't say psyched. It's like there's a calm. It's like this. They're present, fully present, but also anticipating anything. So the analogy we always give is if you were driving like a Bugatti, 200 miles an hour, if you're driving like $1 million car and you're going 200 miles an hour, you can't be looking at your phone. You're like fully present, but also not just in the moment, you have to anticipate things that could go wrong. And you're excited. Like, what if a dog comes out? You're fully engaged. And so there's this presence. And when you watch a Bill Clinton speak, he's so present. He's so there. And the two things I always say to people is when you're communicating with somebody, one-on-one, could be with your mom or whatever. And my mom frustrates me a lot of times. She's rambling about stuff and I'm like, and so I will feel myself get frustrated too, but I'm like, how can I be more present right now? If I do something, I'm clear in my schedule and I do go at that time, but my outcome is to make her feel heard and seen, not just there for my own needs. And so, some of these principles have really helped me expand my vision. Like, what is this trying to teach me? How can I be more of this despite of this? How do I actually enjoy the process? And I was talking to my mom on the way here. So there's always that. But the two things that I'd said to you on one of our calls that I think is the belief. So there's the results come from actions, decisions, thoughts, feelings, but there's a belief system that drives all of that. And so when Bill Clinton speaks, his belief is what I'm saying is the most important thing in the world. And you listening, you are the most important person that could be hearing this. And so there's a sincerity, there's a warmth, there's a presence. And I believe this, and this is a Jim Rohn-ism, that you should live your life as a public figure. And I know that even if I'm harsh to somebody, 1,000 other people might see me being harsh. And that might turn somebody off, or somebody could see how I handled that. And this is why I got into a lot of other seminar rooms that other people didn't. Somebody came and saw a talk, or Tony had heard about me going into a company where one of his friends worked there, got back to Tony, got back to a lot of other people. They're like, man, this guy, he did this thing. He really showed up, and he could have made somebody feel like really small, but he didn't. And so there's a belief about these people, belief about learning, a belief about how I can be. And as Jim Rohn said, live your life like a public figure. Somebody's watching, and it might be a kid. It might be somebody. And then they learn from me because I am, maybe for many of them, the first motivational speaker they've ever seen. And I'm a representation of a brand called Tony Robbins. And I love this man. I love self-development. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like what it's done for me, all these books, all this information. But one bad experience for somebody where they see me acting like a jerk, they're like, now the first person, like most of us can think of our first time we made love or first time we drove a car. Like the first novel experience stays with you. The first cut is the deepest, as the song goes. And so the first experience you have, I might taint somebody's experience of self-development, and they might never go to that seminar. They might never read that book. And there's so many books out there today. Like your book's great, but I read a lot of books where it's just like somebody told them they should write a book. And they're like, oh, I'm doing this for my marketing. And now I'm like, this is a really shitty book. People have been telling me for years to write a book. So I'm actually writing one now because now I've got something where I know I can write a really special book. But I don't want to write a book in a weekend and, have somebody record me. And then, it's like, I want to write a book. It's like, I want this to be part of my legacy. And so I'll take the time. Anything that's value takes time, energy, and attention. Like you have a $200 suit or a $2,000 suit, time, energy, and attention. That might not look the same, but you can feel there's something different about this. Even though it's the same material, there's something there. And if we put time, energy, and attention to our communication with ourselves and others, with ourselves and journaling and meditation and thought, reviewing our own thoughts, time, energy, and attention to our thoughts about other people and ourselves and the world, and really treat that with care, it becomes quality communication. And the quality of our life comes down to the quality of our communication. And so to be a quality person, I think it's about quality communication. So I think it's super important.
Wow. That was freaking amazing. Wow.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
I mean, if you think about it, all major wars really came down to a miscommunication. Most marriages that fall apart come down to communication or miscommunication. Oh. So saying that communication is the most important thing, I mean, I don't think you can dispute that,
Everything's communication.
Because it all flows from there, So let me ask, let's do some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, I did want to share this one thing. And I know I'd shared this with you when we talked. One of the things that really anchored me, so very long story short, I came back to work for Tony's company. I did get into acting. After a few years with Tony's company, I left. I decided to get back into acting, and I followed this one man's career, Greg Plitt, who was like a fitness model guy, and we were born around the same, like 4 days apart, and a little bit of friends, but I kind of modeled his career. And I ended up booking this job that put like a billboard of me in Times Square, and I was acting a bit, and all these amazing things happened. But then I got really sick. Tony helped me out. I came back to work for his company, and in that time, I was booking all these acting gigs. I did have the confidence and the communication. I felt like I could book anything. And when I came back to Tony's company, though, we had this 3-hour kind of intervention, and he edified me so hard, said I was like what the company's all about. He's like, if you want to know what our company stands for, it's this effing man right here. Eli, stand up. Everybody look at this man. What are the qualities of this man? Everybody's like, he's authentic. He's this, he's that. He just bombarded me, and he gave me a standard to live up to. He held me to a higher standard. And so just like we talk about with the 7 steps of creating lasting change, he conditioned me, and he made it ecologically sound where my environment supported this new identity.
So you had to be that way.
I had to be that way. And he put me in a position of leadership where other people were dependent on me to be that way.
Was that leverage?
Of course that's leverage. Yeah. And he did it based on my needs for significance. So he's a pretty smart guy. He's not his first radio, and I realized what he had done. But in that conversation, in this interaction, because you had asked about the judgment and not being able to influence them if they feel judged, in that dialogue, in that conversation, he said something to all of us, not just to me, but he said this, and I recorded what he said. And I know I mentioned this to you, but I recorded what he said. I transcribed it. It was like a 90-second thing. And it was so powerful for me as to what it means to influence, what it means to sell, what it means to connect with somebody deeply enough where they trust me enough to make a personal recommendation with their livelihood and their life. Like, that's a big freaking deal. I want to be prepared for that. But he said this one thing, and I thought it was so powerful. I wrote it down, and I read this one thing that he said to me out loud before all my presentations for years. And this is part of the reason I stood out, because I had an anchor. Just like you reminded. Sometimes you need, maybe you get a tattoo or like a whistle or like a trinket to remind you of something, of how you want to be, or it's like a symbol of something for you. And he said this one thing was so powerful. So I wrote it down, and I said it before all my talks. And this one thing that I said, I know has made me extras of millions of dollars and helped thousands of people because of this one statement about influence. Would you all like to hear what this is?
I would like to freaking hear it. Yeah. Hit me with it.
This is what he said. He said, to influence someone, you must not only understand them. He says, in order to influence somebody, you must connect to this person. You must not only understand them intellectually, you must understand and appreciate them. You must connect to their needs, their wants, their desires, their fears. You got to step into their world without buying into their story. That's the unique balance. To buy into somebody's world, to step into their world and appreciate, but not buy into their limitations. They've already done that to themselves. The added value you offer representing me and our partnership with these potential clients and customers is that we don't buy into their limitation. I don't buy into the limitation of how effing long they can go without food, how late they can stay up, how hard they can clap, or what they can feel. And because I don't buy into those limitations, and because they feel that I care, I can influence them. And I was like, that is it right there. To step into somebody's world and appreciate, have empathy, but not buy into their limitation. He says they must feel that we understand them and appreciate them, not understand and judge them. You can't influence somebody if they feel judged by you. And so to understand and appreciate them. And also there's kind of the spiritual realm is this, is like if something's triggering us, like the world is a mirror. Like maybe we see something inadequate in a person, and we're frustrated because maybe it's something with ourselves we've not dealt with or made peace with. And so I'm looking at this person like why does this person keep on showing up? This one annoying person in that person's body, and that person's body, and that person's body, like all these annoying, why am I experiencing this? And this is also a common, it's kind of a Tonyism, but it's like the quality of your life comes down to the quality of your emotional states. You could be a billionaire and billionaires have killed themselves in the last few years.
Yeah.
And so it's like we think
it's hard, man.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's hard for everybody. People only think it's hard for people when they're on their way up, but it's hard when you get there too.
And I think, there's this classic self-development phrase, be, do, have. In order for you to have something, what's your goals? What do you have to do? Your habits and rituals. Your habits and rituals, what you do daily, or what support your goals. Like if you have a fitness goal, what are your diet, exercise, sleep habits that support your goal? Support your wealth, your relationship, your health, your finances. They're habits and rituals, but two people can have the same habits and the same goals, get very different results.
Right.
Because it's all in the context of who you be, and who you are is composed upon your values. What do you value? A lot of people say they want success, but they actually value comfort. So they don't value because you pay attention to it. You nurture it. Like this is part of yourself, your values. And most people's values are in conflict or out of alignment. So they're kind of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and they're living in limbo. And so people got to get really clear about what's driving them, what's the target. And so something like money, for example, money is a value or success. Money is a means to an end. So some people think they're going to get money. Well, that's not an end. It's a means to an end. You use money for something. Money cannot be the target. And some people make fame the target or money the target. It's a means to an end. And so some people, when I ask them what they want, like they're not even clear. They don't even know what a goal is. And when I do goal setting with people, I'm like, hey, what are your goals? They're like, oh, I want to go to the gym more. I'm like, that's not a goal. That's a habit. Like, well, what's a goal? I say goal. Like imagine like this game of life. Say that there's a soccer field or a basketball field and you just, you're not keeping score. You don't have targets. You don't have competition. You don't have any of that. Like if you're watching, say, a soccer game or a basketball game, without a goal, you just have a bunch of people running around on the court doing nothing with no clear goal. Nobody's going to pay you money for that. Nobody's going to pay money to people who can't consistently hit goals. Put it in the hoop, put it in the net. So what's the goal you're shooting for? And I always tell this story about Michael Jordan being coached by Tony Robbins. And there's this kind of funny moment where Tony asked Michael, like how many points do you want to average? How many games? And Michael's like, well, as many as possible. And Tony says, well, if I gave you this basketball, could you put it in the hoop? He's like, yeah, sure. Okay, why? Because it's right there, and this is my thing. So, okay, what if I put a blindfold on you and spun you around in a circle? Then could you put in the hoop? He says, of course not. Why? Because I wouldn't be able to see what I'm shooting for. So, like, what are you shooting for specifically? Like, what is the vision for your life that you're shooting for? And what you're going to put time, energy, and attention into that. It's a means to an end. But a lot of people have set up the game of life to have this moving target. They're changing their goal all the time. They're not clear about why they want it. There's no clear purpose to push them through all the challenging times. So you need a vision bigger than yourself. You need a hunger more. They've got all these ideas they can regurgitate and make it into a free lead magnet on Facebook or this or these strategies, and people just downloading free webinars and PDFs and collecting information, studying, but not training. Training means you do something over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. You can do it in your sleep, sales, business, communication. It just becomes part of who you are, like intertwined into your identity. And most people are just collecting data. And Stephen Pressfield says this: most people, instead of going deep, they're like a mud puddle, an inch deep and 2 miles wide. Or like there's no depth.
But how do you decide where to go deep? How do you decide on that goal?
You commit to one path for a long time, and that's why when I found Tony, I was like, I'm all in. Like this is going to be my path. And at 27 years old, I was like, I've got to threshold. Like this is going to be my life. And I saw people, even in my own family, I saw other people that were my friends, some 35, 40, and I was very scattered. And I was like, I'm just going to force myself and just stay in this one path for a long time. And it's hard. It's hard. And you're going to have doubts. Maybe I shouldn't do this, or I should do that, or maybe I should do this. And people jump around. I mean, some people, even that are entrepreneurs, they change their offer every few months, or they got this other bell, whistle, e-com, crypto, funnel building expert jam. I'm like, oh, what a mess. What a mess. It's like, you're a mess. It is that because their end is to be famous or to have money. So they've not taken enough time, energy, attention with themselves to find out what they even want. And, that's the deeper work. And it seems meaningless at first. Well, how is that making me money? It's not, but it's kind of everything. It's what drives all of your behavior. It's the, you got this beautiful car, but a shitty engine, and you got this beautiful Ferrari, but there's no gas in the tank. There's no, everything is rusty on the inside. It's they've taken a beautiful shell of like a car, but they put it in like a Nissan Sentra, body, and they just put the shell on top, like one of these kit cars. It looks nice. And then when you open it up and it comes time to perform, it breaks down. And so we got to focus on what's on the inside.
Dude, you should have tried out for like a Quentin Tarantino movie because I could see you with this 15-minute monologue in like a Tarantino film, because you're just so you just flow so smooth. You don't even say like you just go. That's amazing. Dude, there's so much there I want to unpack. Like I was taking mental notes of some of the stuff you said. I want to go into a few of those things, especially when it comes to like sales. And there's a few things you mentioned that I think would be very valuable for people to hear, especially if anybody listening is trying to sell anything. Let me ask a question. Brandon, I see you've been killing that liter of water there. Everybody asks if there's a bathroom break on this show. And
I went right before I came here. I ate at a nice cafe up the street, Mickey's or something.
Oh, Mickey's is great. It's right. Yeah, it's right. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's fantastic. I got to see if I can get Brandon to maybe put like a "We'll be back" screen up or something, so we can take like a 2-minute bathroom break. I don't know if that's possible, especially if I throw it at him on the fly. But
I could make sure it's on the next show, but
so here, let's do this. I wanna jump into some of the stuff that you said, but like rapid fire, like soundbite stuff, because I think it would be valuable to really have some of this stuff out there. Because a lot of people teach sales, but like you seem to go way in the back nether regions of the brain and the mind where it really matters. Like anybody can sit there and say, oh, when someone says this, say that. But why are you saying that? So one thing I noticed that you said was appreciate without buying into their BS, basically. Yeah. And so like one example, if you're on a sales call or in any kind of sales situation and somebody says, well, I don't have time, right? Like, are you saying you can appreciate how they feel about that without buying into the fact that they actually don't have time? Because let's face facts, virtually every person that ever said I don't have time on a sales call, it's been a limiting belief. I mean, if we really want something, and when I say a sales call, I'm talking about if it's something they really want, they need, and it will really enrich their lives. I'm not talking about a car or something. But the idea that losing weight or whatever it is, I don't have time, achieving your dreams, I don't have time, working on your business, I don't have time. Things that you really want, you make time for. So are you saying that you want to appreciate how they feel and what's driving them to feel that way without buying into that actual literal excuse?
Yeah. So there's a few different types of belief, or I guess you could say objections. Some is a smoke screen, like a conditioned response. They just what they always say, which is that one allotment for time. Because they've obviously taken time to book the call. You know what I mean? So it's
you have time to get on the phone. So
yeah. So in that circumstance, usually I'll just brush right past it, or I might work on it and reframe the belief. But it's either, it could be logistical. Like that would be a logistical. If we took it for face value, it's logistical. I logistically don't have time. This is my schedule. And so we could work. Well, if I could show you a way that you could do this and that and move things around. Like, is it logistical, or I need more time to think about it? Is it logistical? But 80-90% of the time, when people say any objection, it is uncertainty based. And so the definition of a belief is a feeling of certainty. And so if somebody says an objection, what they're saying is, I feel uncertain in you. I feel uncertain in myself. I feel uncertain in your process. It's just them saying, I'm not certain in what you said. And 99% of the time when somebody gets an objection, it's because we didn't address that ahead of time and we didn't hear. So how I handle it personally, I teach a lot, and we give people basic frameworks that can handle probably 70% of those objections based on things they do up front and some things inside of the close that are very tactical. And I can demonstrate some of those. But the way that I ultimately do it, and when I'm dealing with somebody on a really advanced level, I can hear some of that, some of their insecurities and their doubts. And even if somebody says they want to buy this program for more money, I know that's a means to an end. So I'm really understanding what is actually driving it. I'm genuinely curious.
What are they going to do with the money?
Or it's just like, why is that important to you now? Okay, and what might that do for you, do you think? Okay, just to help me understand, when you said this, is it more this, or would you saying it's more that? Okay, well, why though? And I'm a bit skeptical in my tone, which as, okay, why? Or I'm like, and that's part of the reason I think you've been so successful. There's like a natural skepticism, kind of like, don't give me the bullshit type thing. And it makes people like, all right, this is a no bullshit kind of guy, And so that's the thing. So it sends a message out subconsciously, and you do protect your time, and you are worthy of your time. And you're like, look, like I genuinely, this isn't a sales technique. Like, hey, I don't got time to deal with you. Like, I literally don't have time. Make a fucking decision, like right now. Yeah. And that's kind of in the subtext of your tonality, which can serve you. In certain ways, some other ways, maybe not if we do it everywhere, but, in business.
I've had that happen on calls where I'll be like, I'll say like, let's say you were to become successful. Let's say you were to make all this money, what have you. What would you do with it? What's you don't just want to stare at the money and have it stare back at you. You want to do something. Because I like to understand, are they doing it because their mother's sick and they want to pay for treatment? Are they doing it because they want a new house because they've been living in a small one for years and then, well, okay, yeah, I want a bigger house. Well, what's driving you to want a bigger house? Well, it could be a lot of things. It could be a new baby. It could be the fact that maybe they've been promising their wife a larger house for years and they haven't pulled through. And so it really isn't even the house. It's a conflict in their marriage. Like, it goes so much deeper than I want to make money. And I think when you truly understand that, you can connect with somebody on a sales call or in a sales situation a lot better. Because to me, you mentioned belief, right? You mentioned you have to have a belief. My belief when I get on a call is that my product is the best in the world. And if this person were to be exposed to that product and use that product, it would enrich their life more than anything that they've ever done. So it is my duty to conduct myself in the most efficient way and get through to that person so that they buy, because I would be doing them far more of a disservice to not sell them this than to let them off the call. And part of that is me spending years perfecting my product and making sure it's amazing. And that's any product that I make. I try to make it. My rule is this: if I cannot, when I'm done with a product, when I'm done with a coaching program, anything, right down to a physical planner, whatever it is, I have to be able to say to myself, it is far more painful to let this person go without this product than it is to take their money and sell them this product. It has to be that good. And in my mind, that's what I'm thinking when I'm on a call. And, you know, I mean, I believe that underlying principle and that underlying belief has to be there. And if it's not there, then go out there and make that happen. Make your product. You know, you can't just commit to being good at sales and have a shit product. You have to commit to both.
That gives you the certainty. And also, that is the most basic principle ever, but people have a desire to go towards pleasure and away from pain. And if somebody says no to your product, it's because they associate more pain to buying than to not buying. If somebody says yes, they associate more pleasure to buying than to not buying. And so sometimes we think, like, what's the fancy objection handling? It's like what they're saying. Like, sometimes if they don't call you back and it was on the schedule, well, somewhere they associated more pain to talking to you than not talking to you. You know, it's more pleasurable for them to do whatever. And so, like, we just got to understand what's driving this person. What does that mean? And we can do some things with language and questions to change their associations, where or somebody like, you know, I'm kind of thinking about this. Okay, well, hold on. I'm not even sure that this would be good for you, but I have to ask, what's going to happen for you if nothing changes? I mean, do you want that? Or do you actually want to start doing something else? Well, I guess I want to start doing something. Well, hold on. Why though? Well, I guess I'd be able to this and this and this. And how long have you wanted that? All right. I mean, tell me, like, why now? Why not continue to put this off? Because you can put this off indefinitely. But there's going to be a day where it becomes harder and harder. And what I see in you are patterns. Now, it's like a habit. And if you don't do something to change this way of thinking, if you don't do something to change about this now and reinforce that habit for another 2, 3, 5 years, do you think it'll be easier to change in the future? Or do you think it'll actually be harder to change? Habitual ways of running your business that can make you very, very successful. And in business, we can teach you those. There are patterns. There are things that you can do to become very, very successful. But there are also patterns that make people stuck. There are patterns that lead people to have a very challenging life. I see some of those patterns in you, and I'd like to help you break them right now, if you'll let me.
Dude, that's awesome.
So I've said something like that hundreds of times.
Incredible.
So what I'm doing is we've talked about, this, you know, money, time, beautiful funnels. I said, well, there's patterns. So I'm anchoring it to, it's a pattern, it's a system. And so as a business owner, not operator, it's about creating systems. And another word for systems or kind of habits are these patterns and really making sure, like, successful business has a different pattern, unsuccessful business, different pattern, successful person, thought patterns, there's patterns. And so what we're here to talk about is some of your patterns. And so in my Tony talk, I anchored everything to our success comes down to our patterns. And I'd say, audience, what is another word for patterns? That's right, our habits. What is a habit? Something you do over and over again. Something you do over and over again. And so I get them, and I'd say, who here has good habits? Put them up, you know. And some people wouldn't raise their hand. I'd say, you know, we all have good habits. Who here has good habits? Put them up. And I'd say, some of you didn't raise your hand. Some of you have a habit of being pretty hard on yourself. Some of you have a habit of not giving yourself any credit. Who brushed their teeth this morning? Raise your hand. Actually, you would have lied about that. So I can't even ask you, but let me ask you this. Honest question, please be honest. Who has some bad habits? Put them up nice and high. 2 hands go up. Thank you for your honesty. We've all got some habit or some area of our life that we like to prove. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. Why do billionaires get coached by Tony? Because we all realize somewhere deep down that no matter where you're at, you all have a next level. All of us do. That's what makes us feel like we're alive. If a plant's not growing, what is it doing? It's dying. And right now, I'm not saying that you're dying physically, even though we are. You know, we're not going to be here. But maybe it's in your health, your relationship. Maybe it's in your business. Maybe you realize there's a next level, and maybe you was not growing. But you think about the first time you kissed somebody or drove a car, there was an aliveness inside of you. And I'm sure you've got some of that. But would it be okay if I shared with you a process how you can get even more out of that right now today? If you're up for it, say aye. And so I'm getting buy-in over and over again. And I'm getting people to realize there's a gap between where they are, where they want to be. There's something stopping them. We're going to change it today. And I say, look, even if you're already very successful, can you agree there's a next level? And maybe you can think about the first time you kissed somebody or drove a car. There was an aliveness inside of you, a feeling of growth and progress. And I'm sure you have some of that, but would it be okay with you, permission, if I share with you a process on how you can get even more out of that in your life? Are you up for it? Are you sure? And so I'm framing people constantly. And you know, I just did this seminar over the weekend with Chase, and I was talking to my buddy Marcel on the way here. Amazing, he's 23 years old, amazing hypnotist. A lot of it's in your confidence and your pre-frame and your confidence. And so confidence, a lot of people don't really know what confidence is. They think, what's that? You know, this car, this house, this thing. Confidence comes down to, and you know, Chase's definition and really the real definition, it's been bastardized, but confidence comes from a feeling of safety. Like I feel safe in this conversation. And so when I can hear in somebody's tonality, somebody objects, their tonality changes, they get stressed and all this stuff, they make it mean something, but it's like, hey, it's okay. And so there's a certainty, there's a warmth that puts them, like Bill Clinton. It's like, it's okay. He's these elements of charisma, there's gratitude in the moment, appreciation, there's a care for their appearance, there's a tonality, a warmth, and an enjoyment, you know, that makes somebody really interesting to connect with. And when you can put somebody's nervous system at ease, they actually have different, you know, emotions like and thoughts going to their brain. But a lot of times that resistance comes because somebody doesn't feel safe. And, you know, one of the things that I'll do, even with some of my clients, I hypnotize them now, and I'll get them to think of times in their life they felt really safe. Maybe it was, you know, being hugged by their grandfather, you know, being in this place where they felt totally safe. You feel totally confident, which are embedded commands, by the way. You think about a time you feel totally safe. You feel totally connected, just like that time before. You begin to feel those feelings right now, and you amplify them. Like, what would it be like? And so their mind starts to go there if they feel safe with me. And I think whether I'm hypnotizing somebody or leading somebody or selling somebody, I've got to make them feel safe with me, you know, but also a bit of uncertainty. So, you know, kind of in this matrix that Chase teaches really well is about authority and about novelty. And so if I can make somebody more suggestible, more compliant with my tone, and they see that I'm an authority, not by be over posturing, listen to me, but they can see I'm their nervous system. So we all have our conscious mind, like everybody who's listening to this right now has their conscious mind, but your mammalian brain and your reptilian brain responds to the animal. And if you're resistant to me and you're challenging me and you're doing all these things, but I'm still, it's like you're a you know, like a 6-inch little, you know, animal, like a squirrel, and I'm like a 600-pound gorilla. And it's just like I'm unaffected, and it's like this calmness, and it's like it's okay, like totally fine, resolve. I can genuinely, this isn't a sales thing, but I can like genuinely appreciate where that's coming from. Totally fine, and not anything. Is it just nerves? Not a big deal. And so there's also something we do that we've been teaching this year. So a lot of these scripts and everything are question-based sales, and in the, you know, intelligence agencies teach the way to get students, and it makes people open up.
Well, that right there, that sounds like something to. I was actually going to ask you. I got 4 questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, and you said rapid fire.
Yeah. But now I have to add 5 because that was. I want to know the without questions method. So I'm going to write that down. Without questions method. So here, I got 4 questions I want to ask you. And I want to, like I said, just rapid fire, because I would love to have. I would just love to know your perspective on these things. So the first one is, what is the worst thing you think someone can say on a sales call?
Worst thing?
Like beyond all, right? What is the one thing that you should never say on a sales call, or the thing that you think salespeople or people selling say too often that they really, really shouldn't?
You know, I hate the whole like 20 minutes of rapport, you know, that dogs and cats and all that, just that fluff, like let's get to it. But also right in the beginning of the sales call, there's also an agenda setting. And I think the way that some people do it, like this kind of big dick swinging, like, hey, here's how the call's going to go. I'm going to tell you this. And, you know, we got this many minutes, but I'm very busy. So this posturing of being superior, this posturing and the way that most salespeople open up the call. And so again, you can ask all the questions, but there's a very good chance that people will give you surface answers. And so the way that a lot of people communicate, just based on their tonality. And so again, there's what people say, but you know, in NLP they talk about this, and it's been argued a lot, but communication is about 7% words, 38% tonality, and then 55% body language. And body language is also regulating your nervous system, feeling calm, and it sends a message to your nervous system. So if I'm like all tense and hyped up on 28 Red Bulls, and I'm like, you're gonna get tight. And if we're connected, and you're gonna have different thoughts and feelings, and you're gonna feel uncertain about me, which is gonna produce certain thoughts about my program. And so we're creating a lot of this based on not just what people say, but how they're being. And I love that quote. Probably my favorite quote ever. Definitely top 10. Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, "Who you are speaks so loudly people can't even hear what you say." And you know, when I work for Tony, about a dozen of us, same script, same words, same product, same price point, same city, same everything, same everything. Why were my sales 3 to 5 times higher with the same words, same price, same everything? And some people say, well, it's a script and all of that. Yes, you do need to have a script, and that's like training wheels. And to be connected to somebody, you can't be conscious for what you're saying. And so what people do on the call, they become self-conscious. Everything's energy, as I said. But in this communication, this dance of communication that I'm transferring, I believe you can't give that which you don't possess. I can't give you $1 if I don't have one. But what I want to give you in this conversation is clarity and certainty. And so I communicate with clarity and certainty. And I can't give it to you unless I have it. And I can't have it if my energy is being dropped by self-judgment fatigue. Should I say it like this? Persona fatigue. I'm trying to be like somebody else. Or decision fatigue. Should I say it like, and then there's like this mumbly kind of stuttering, I don't know where I'm going attitude. And also sometimes I do naturally talk pretty quick. And I like that because I'm also used to speaking on stage, and I've got to get people's attention, and I'm also ramping them up sometimes, my engine, like my energy and my communication and all that. And I'll drive somebody, and then I'll slow it down a little bit. And that movement makes things very dynamic. It's the reptilian part of the brain.
So it's like you cannot give
that
what you don't possess.
And so I think beyond the words, because you can take any script, and they're all, these days, the self-development coaching industry has become so evolved. All the scripts are pretty good. But, you know, I can take the worst script and do better than some people with the best script.
Right.
And so it's not so much that. It's genuine curiosity and concern. And so the one thing I think people do is they make judgments about who this person is, where the person will begin to shut down and not give you the sensitive information. And also, you know, I've got so many friends in sales, and we you know, the best ones out there, we all share scripts, and you know, I'm like, what are the SOPs that this client's doing, and here's some stuff that I've learned. And so the best salespeople out there are like my best friends. And so I've seen all the scripts and all of it and the questions, and some of it's very good, but a lot of it, we teach some of the same things, so it becomes the same questions. And if we're selling, like for me, I always sold salespeople. And so if I did feel, felt, found, or any of that stuff, they've already heard that. A tactic shown is a tactic blown. And so if you're doing what everybody else does, and you're selling other entrepreneurs, and they've already heard that shit, they're going to put you in a box. You have a script, but they have an internal script. Like when you walk into a dental office, there's a certain smell. Like you're like, okay, I've been here before. And the moment you start sounding like everybody else at the beginning of a sales call, they put you in a box as just another salesperson. So what do? That sucks. They're being like everybody else. Okay, how do I need to not be like everybody else? You be yourself, you know?
Yeah.
It's but that's easier said than done. It was, you know, big challenge for me my whole life. And even when I worked for Tony, I wanted to be like Tony, and I'm like chest out, and like, you know, I'm talking all like this. And, you know, I saw Jarek really struggle because he wanted to be like his father so much. I wanted to be like Tony. I mean, everybody that's in self-development.
You got to be you.
You got to be you. And once I figured that out, sales changed for the better.
You made a point about the script, and it's funny because we were talking about acting earlier.
Yeah.
And I always say, you know, I say to both people that we train, whether it's salespeople, I say, you know, if I give 100 actors a script, and those 100 actors have the same exact script, and they go and they audition for that role, how many actors get the role.
One.
Just one. Why?
Yeah.
Because that one actor did it better. So don't tell me that all you need is a script. Don't tell me that if you have the script, you'll be fine, because you actually have to execute on that script. And I love what you're saying about, if you're not confident in what you're doing and you're like, oh, what, and you're in your brain, you're like, what should I say? Should I say it this way? You're gonna come out like that. And if you sound like that, you don't sound confident in yourself, then your customer's not gonna feel confident in you, because you don't even feel confident in yourself. So it goes so much deeper than just reading a script. And you have to really become the person that actually feels that way, actually is confident. So I love what you said about that. Let me ask you another question, rolling right into this. So I asked you what was the worst thing you can do on a sales call, and I think to sum that up, it was, basically try too hard and get in your own head so that you can't execute and just think it's a script. But if you had three things, like just very short, three things to give somebody in terms of three things they can do on any sales call or in any sales situation, even selling from stage, any sort of influential persuasion setting, three core things that if they do it right now, they are going to do better tomorrow than they did today. What would those three things be?
One is your belief system. And so realize that people do things to avoid pain, gain pleasure. And so I have a strong belief system about what it means for them. They're like, if they do what I'm going to say, it means a lot of pain for, if you don't do it, it's going to pain for you. If you do it, it's going to be pleasure for you. And when I communicate, I frame everything that I'm saying in their best interest. Like, hey, you might want to write this down so that you can remember it. In order to really master this, to be able to spend more time with your kids, what would that mean to you? So that in order to be able to means to you. And so I'm framing it over and over again. So, hey, you might want to consider buying into this program so that you have more time to be able to spend with your kids, which will allow you to do whatever you want. What would it mean to you to be able to have that? That is what you want, isn't it? And so I'm framing things back in their listening, and this would be in number two. So there's a belief that drives all of that, and my belief that I work on, just like I wouldn't, like you shower before you go to work. Hopefully everybody's working from home now, so you don't have to. But like, just like I'm preparing for the day, I'm like, I did that talk with Jordan Belfort and I outsold him, and and he's so good, but I had such a strong belief system about what I said and so much certainty. And it's like certainty, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger that it gets. And I knew that when I stepped there, it's like ready to perform. Like I've visualized, I've got clear targets. And so, and it's that great book, Think and Grow Rich, definiteness of purpose. I know why I'm there, and life supports that what supports life. If I do it for me, to be self-actualized, self-confident, self-respecting, most people can't even do that. But when you show up for your family or you show up for your clients, more of you shows up. And so I show up with an expanded vision of self that is also like I'm connected to this person. Like, and I give people the example, and I know this isn't short, but when you, like, say you do things only for yourself and maybe you go to work or not, there's no real consequences if your bills are paid, but then maybe you have a kid and you don't need to show up at work usually, but now you got to support the kid and you don't want to go to work, but you don't just show up for you, you show up for your family. You show up for your family, and when you show up for somebody outside of you, more of you shows up. There's an expanded version of you when you show up for your family. When you show up for your company, more of you shows up. For me, I love self-development. I love sales, and I think there's a lot of shitty programs and a lot of shitty people. You can use some of my stuff because I would take a stand for the industry. I love this industry. Life supports that what supports life. And so some people have seen me, and I'll badmouth people a little bit, which is one of my things. I'm not doing that anymore, but I have in the past. And I'm like, that's not who I want to be. That's not in alignment with my character. So when you look at like a Gandhi or a Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela, they supported humanity with their words, and life supported them. And so when you think about these people who have become legendary, they transcend time and space with their words because of the meaning of what it means to communicate this. So we can communicate on a higher level, and often people buy into the frame because there's a higher amount of energy there and purpose and conviction. If you can really draw from that, you'll be supported in that vision if it's real for you.
Was that two or three?
That was two.
That was two. Do you have a third one? Two is deep. So
yeah. So these are things that I would do to prepare, or on the call to be effective best practices.
Yeah, any kind of persuasion situation.
Any kind of persuasion situation. So it's thinking in terms of the person's best interest, selling consequences. Heaven if you do, hell if you don't. But also, and I alluded to it in the third one, it's definitely it's the person having a clear target. So the three things that I focus on.
Is it helping them realize what the target is?
Well, here's the secret for me. So as I alluded to earlier, like you need, if my target is to get a sale, you feel that I'm trying to get a sale. If my target is just to sell you, I come off with commission breath. So I got really curious in my preparation for all of my events. I thought, what drives people's actions? All actions are preceded by thoughts and feelings. So I wrote down, I got really clear, what exactly do I want you thinking about you, yourself, the future, the company, the environment, about me? What are the thoughts and feelings that this person needs to have that will compel them to action? And if I can see in the middle of the conversation is not going that way, I say, well, hold on, Dan, here's something you might want to think about. I'm going to tell you what to think about. Or I can appreciate what you're saying. And really, listen to me. I can tell you're very smart. So if I interrupt them, I'll compliment them and they'll go internal. They're like, yeah. And I'm curious.
You showed me that thing when we were having cigars, that thing where you say, listen, Dan, and the
great thing about you is,
right. And so you command the conversation.
So it's a pattern interrupt.
But then immediately you give a compliment. So it's like, for a second, you're like, this guy's a oh wait, no, he's not. He's complimenting me.
Yeah. Listen, the great thing about you is you've done this and this, and I really admire. And I think in some ways we're like, you're definitely further ahead than me. And I think all of us in the community, all of us out here, are really wanting something more. And so I have to ask. If you were to think about, so it's, we're the same. And then I still, if I notice also, if I'm there with somebody live, I can notice change in their facial expressions, or if they're like this, I might even change I'll change my posture. I might shrug my shoulders a little bit, like, I don't know. So I go in fear, because if you're like all superior and I'm superior right back, then it's this. And I say, well, and I don't know, but it seems like, and I have to know, and I'll do some things based on what I see in your eye contact and how you're responding to what I'm saying.
So to make this like a tactical thing. Yeah. I would imagine you're on a sales call, or you're in a sales situation, and the prospect is just getting off the beaten path, right? They're trying to control the conversation, or they're just lost in their own words. And so you say, listen, Bob, I really appreciate. So you take back the control of the conversation, but then you immediately give a compliment that shows how much you appreciate, and then you give them an alternative way to think about whatever it is they're rambling about.
Yeah, that's kind of a syntax, but I'm just doing that to show you that there's these three postures: superior, equal, and inferior, and I'm using all of them all the time.
Right. Superior would be you're an authority figure over. Equal would be you're a peer, and inferior would be like building
all these young high ticket sales guys that get some Dan Locke script or something, or like whoever's, could be mind script or whatever. They're 22 years old and they're talking to a 40-year-old business owner about their success. Listen, here's how this goes. I've got this script. I'm going to ask you some questions. They're posturing over superior, and the other person. So the other person's going to have to admit they're inferior. Well, what's the challenge? Why do you think? And it's not going to land. Like, if I was 27 as a speaker. I'm talking to seminar rooms with 60-year-old men who are millionaires. They're like, get the freak out of here, fruitcake. And when I postured like that, then they start challenging me. And then I learned after a while how to challenge them back and win and beat them down. But they still didn't buy. So I had asked, what's my outcome to make people feel wrong and like shit, because I'm a professional speaker and I can do that, and I've learned all these linguistic tools. My outcome is to connect with them and get these people to feel safe enough to take advice from me. On
that takes discipline. That takes discipline, and I'll tell you a funny story. I was on a call. So we hired somebody at my other company, and they were like a sales manager for a big influencer, somebody that real big. I'm not going to mention the name because I don't like throwing shade at anybody, but they, I was interested in their product just because they had mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting. And it was a decent. I think it was like $5,000 or something. It was a decent. It was like a coaching program just for one specific thing in business, and I get on a call with the sales rep. And I knew the new sales manager for that company. And so I get on a call with the sales rep, and immediately he's like, hey, I just want to let you know that I've been following you for some time. When I saw your name come across my desk, I was excited, because I've just been following you for a long time, and right? And I could kind of sense this sort of like kind of BS. So I was like, oh,
ask you for something.
yeah. I was like, well, so he was like, oh, I've been following your stuff for like, I'm like, how long? I was asking. I was like, how long? What have you seen from me that you liked? And he couldn't come up with an answer, right? So like number one, I think it's important to understand that if you're going to pull something like that out, especially if you're on a call with somebody who's known or maybe you said that you've done some research on them, you actually you can't just say it. You actually have to do it. You know what I mean? Like you can't get on a call and say, oh, I looked up your company and it's amazing. And they're like, oh, cool. What do you like about it? And then you have no idea what their company is, and then like you said, he starts saying that, well, what are your struggles and stuff? And like, wow, I'm not like, dude, just, you got to know who you're talking to. That's why I remember one time at our highest level consulting is $100,000 at my other company. And so I let one of my reps mention or listen to my sales call, and immediately it's like, wait a minute, you didn't do all the things you told us to do. And it's like, well, I was selling $100,000 offer to somebody else who'd made millions of dollars doing what they do. Like not somebody who's, it's a totally different context, So I did do the same things, but I didn't, I knew their awareness. I knew their awareness of those questions. And I think that is why I think the script mentality is so toxic to people who try to sell, because they literally think it is about the script. And that's why you will see like a director will say, I mean, I've watched Quentin Tarantino interviews, and Quentin Tarantino, you got to follow exactly what he says, right? He is not the biggest ad lib, like he's like, do it this way. But I've even seen interviews where he's let an amazing actor go off and they just went off on a complete impromptu, and he kept it because it was magic. And it was magic not because that actor read a script and there was magic in the script. It's because the actor read the script and understood the character, and in that moment knew that because he's a good actor, what he would do in that moment would be magic based on his understanding of the character, not a script. And I think a lot of salespeople or entrepreneurs who sell their own products just do not get that. And they want the easy way. They just want to read off a script. And by reframing their mindset around that, they can achieve a higher level of sales, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's typically, what I'm looking for is in what's driving their behavior now. And so something's off in their process or their procedure, or they're not clear. So there's just something there. Right. But also I have a belief that it's possible for them. And so I believe that they can do it. But I believe that somebody's got patterns of thought, feeling, or emotion that maybe, have them in conflict or not clear, or they're scattered or something's off. And so it's like, I don't know who said it first, but they say that like 90% of business problems are actually personal problems.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I relate a lot of that to chunk down again to communication problems internally or with themselves about what they actually want and why they want it. And so I want
to switch there. I want to switch to communication problem. And by the way, just to wrap that story up, I did not buy from that guy. I called up the sales manager and I said, dude, you got it your hands full. These guys are terrible. And then I just said, I didn't even want to talk to that guy. Can you just quickly tell me what the offer was? And he told me, and I was like, all right, I'll buy it. Can you take my card? And I ended up buying, because he understood. He's like, I don't want to hear any of this crap. Just tell me what it is. Here's how I can help you. Done. But okay, so communication, right? So I think a lot of communication is your state, right? If you, like, for instance, when you came up to me today, like, I'll give you a perfect example, something I struggle with a lot. And I think that a lot of people struggle with, especially entrepreneurs, because so much is put on us, so much can be put on our plate. If I have a bad day, it's very difficult sometimes for me to get in a good, hey, State, how you doing? And you seem to I can't imagine you never had a bad day,
I haven't for sure.
But every time I see you, you're always like, hey, Dan, like you come in here, like, hey, you're just so, and our mutual friend Myron is the same way. The guy comes in here. I had a bad day, right? I had a really, really bad day. Financial stuff, stock market, all that crap. And he comes in and he's super positive. And I say to him, I said, Myron, did you just like win the lottery or something? Not that he needs it, but but I said, what happened? Like, you're just so, and I don't even think he was that positive that day. I think I was just in such a negative state that I noticed how positive he was. He's positive like that every day. But I said, what's going on? Like, did you win the lottery or something? Like, why are you so positive? And he goes, no, actually 2 days ago, my dad died. And I was like, because I'm just thinking about this. I'm noticing how positive he is. His dad just died.
It's a tough one.
And he's still positive. And I'm over here worried about some stuff that doesn't even remotely compare to that. And, I asked him that. I'm like, how are you staying so positive? And he's like, well, he had a very logical explanation for it. He said, well, if my dad knew that I didn't celebrate his life and I let it affect me that much, he would be disappointed in me, and I don't want to disappoint my dad. And I was like, so I got to ask you, how do you always, what is the secret to maintaining such a pleasant, positive, refreshing, and warm and welcoming state? Because you always are in it. What is your secret to that?
I was we were teaching this seminar over the weekend. It was such an amazing weekend. It was great. And when I do experience in those challenging moments, I often think well, how do I nab this? NAB. What could I notice, appreciate, or believe about this person, this moment? There's always something there that I could notice, appreciate, or believe about this that can empower me. But also, even being here. So when I started this off, I think a lot of people in their life, they drift. And I love Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil, Thinking Over Rich. They talk about the drifter. And I think these people that are drifters, they don't have clarity of purpose, definiteness in their purpose. And so they don't feel like their actions mean anything. And so it's very easy for those weeds to kind of like bullshit just to fill your brain if you're don't have directed thoughts in mind and energy. And so even right before we started this, I said, what's the outcome? What do you want to get out of this? And so I have a way to direct my mind, because I know that if my mind isn't directed on something, I get up, there's like all this shit in my phone and problems and all of that. But it's like, and you've heard this before, it's such a cheesy kind of one-liner, but what we focus on expands. What we focus on, we tend to manifest or get more of. And so I need to control my focus. And so the way that I do that is typically with some kind of empowering question. What do I really want? Even for myself, when I do these seminars, some guy might be a jerk. And then after a while, I would want to protect myself. And so I'd find all these ways to emotionally destroy somebody and make them feel like shit. And then I was like, well, is that my outcome to make you feel bad? No, my outcome is to get a sale. So what's the path? What's my real target here? And then it was like, is my path to even get a sale? It's like, not really. It's like, is that what I want? And so I became, and I tell people this all the time, I became the top salesperson for Tony with the same script and all of it. And so I had a higher purpose, a higher vision for what I wanted in those moments. And so more life supported me in those moments because my vision was pure about what I actually wanted for these people. And I was in a really challenging spot, and I got into self-development. Tony was like, they say like your first lover is the one you really meet. Tony, for me, some other people like Landmark Forum or there's some other great seminars, but Tony was like my first everything, my first love of self-development. He was like my gateway drug. He just like opened me up to all this other stuff about communication and myself and my self-discovery. And for me, it was like, wow, this is amazing. And I thought about, so one of the things I would think about before my seminars, because I know if I was there for me, I'm going to be self-conscious of making everything about me, which puts up a wall between me and the person. And so I can't make it about me or even about you. I got to make it about a bigger vision. Like, what does this mean to the world? Like, how do I guide this conversation to something that's empowering for everybody? And sometimes some people hear it, some people not. But that's my, and am I perfect in it? Sometimes I have my desires and needs and things like that, and I'm human. But I try my best for that, and I've got a clear target and an outcome that I'm seeking. And so as we all hit speed bumps, and it's such a cheesy analogy, but you've heard this before, that if a plane takes off from, say, New York to Tampa, it's off track like 97% of the time, trail winds and, and turbulence and all of that. But because it's knows the outcome, it moves around the turbulence. And I think sometimes we hit some turbulence and we lose sight of our vision. We lose sight of our outcome in this conversation. So with my mom, I'm like, am I trying to make her feel bad? No. When I'm in these salespeople, do I want to make them feel bad? No. Do I want to get a sale? Yeah, but the sale is a means to a higher end, and so I'm connected to the end. And part of my superpower in selling Tony, I loved me some Tony Robbins, but ultimately I had an experience. And my mission wasn't to be the top salesperson. My mission wasn't to get sales. I wasn't to get money. I wanted all that. But ultimately I wanted this other person's life to be better. And I wanted to share them with an experience that I had. and I knew they had fear and resistance, I was like, hey, me too. I had the same things, but I went for it. And if I hadn't had that experience, if I didn't go for it, I think I would not be here. But because I did it, I'm experiencing all this, and I want you to have that too. I want to make the world a better place by exposing people to these principles. And so that's my superpower. So I have a mission bigger than myself. I have a mission bigger than the moment. And so when I get that resistance, and if people challenge me in the moment, I love this quote, and I know you want to ask a question, but I want to share this one quote from Wayne Dyer, because this really hit it for me. And he says, if you take an orange and you squeeze it, what comes out?
Orange juice.
Why? Because the only thing that can come out is what's on the inside. Now, what happens when life, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, what happens when life squeezes you? What comes out? Fear, anxiety, stress. It can't come out unless it's on the inside. And so whose responsibility is it to control what's happening inside of you? It's yours. And so we have a responsibility before every conversation, before every seminar, before every podcast, whatever it is, to fill ourselves up with gratitude or belief or certainty or a vision that makes the world better. And I think that if people do that consistently, again, that's like a muscle, that if you do it over and over again, the stronger it gets and people buy into your frame. And if it's a positive frame, people want to do things for you. And a great example is, have you read the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi?
No, I have not.
Amazing book. It's the book that Steve Jobs gave away the most, and that whole thing.
One. Well, damn. Now I need to read it. Now I feel dumb for not reading it.
It's really kind of a spiritual, kind of out there book. But he's the guy that is responsible for bringing yoga to the West. And he came here, and within maybe 25 years or something like that, or 30 years, I forget exactly how long he was here. If you've been to the spiritual yoga retreat center, whatever it's called, in San Diego, it is hundreds of yards of oceanfront property, like in Carlsbad. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Was given to he met some guy and was like, had this presence and this warmth and this sincerity, and he says, I want to do this. And a billionaire gave him all this land, oceanfront property. He created over 220 of those spiritual centers on the nicest part of the nicest city. There's one right on the ocean in Malibu. It's like acres and acres and acres. The people that are the wealthiest people in the world met this man once and were willing to give him tens of millions of dollars of property after having one conversation, because he had a vision bigger than himself. And these people with means gave him whatever he wanted, gave him all the land, gave him all, left often when they passed away, left the majority of their income to this man's fund. And none of it went to him. And he spent the rest of his years right there on the beach in Carlsbad. And I've been there to that spiritual retreat center, but one man with a conversation, warm, genuine, concerned. And, we speak about grinding and hustling, and people make 100 sales calls. And, one person can enter into a city and look across, be kind and warm and sincere, and look at somebody in the eye and say, hey, how are you? And smile at somebody. And that could be the CEO. And do more in a moment with one smile, one genuine connection than they could have 10 years of grinding. Could open more doors. And, I appreciate this person I'm talking to in this moment, but I also appreciate the person that's inside of them that they could become. And so I'm speaking to that person, and I see one of the things that I do is the biggest gift for all my clients. I visualize what's possible for them, and I speak to them. I hold them to that standard as this best version of themselves. I'm like, here's what I see here. Here's what you can ultimately do in your life. And I hold them to that standard. Will they let me down? Will people not follow suit? Yeah, that's okay. We all make mistakes, but one of the best things I can do for them is to hold that vision with them and hold them to that standard.
So would you say then maintaining that positive state, even when you're having a bad day, and being pleasant all the time, it's if I'm understanding you correctly, it comes down to understanding that your vision or your purpose is bigger than just yourself. And if you were to go and interact with somebody, and just because you experienced a bad day that one day, if you let that affect your state, you let that affect your interactions with other people, and you let that taint your experience that day, it's like you're focusing on yourself and you're ignoring the bigger vision. And really, it's ultimately comes down to it not being about you. It's about what's beyond you. And that reminds you to stay in that positive state. Would you say that's like a summary?
Yeah, it's, it can become almost like a meditative process in that, and the practical application of the self and all of that this is my favorite explanation I've ever heard. It's that the mind wants to be happy, and you've got this, really old brain that's seeking out dings on your phone and approval and, novelty and all this. Your mind wants to be happy. It's like this like a rat in a cage, literally. Like the mind can be that way unless we control it. The mind wants to be happy. Your heart wants to be fulfilled. But your soul is here to evolve. And your soul does not give a darn about what makes you happy or fulfilled. You're here to experience challenges. You're here to grow through them. And as you grow through those challenges and share with people what you learned along your challenges, then you contribute beyond yourself and you have a life of meaning. Like these are the gifts. And it's harder to realize in the moment, but like, you know, in this, if you read a book about this person or watch a movie, this person had this, you know, fairy tale life and they woke up one day and everything was perfect. Next day was perfect. It was perfect. And they just had this perfect life. That is called a really shitty story. Nobody cares about that story. And even if the person's living that life, they will do something to screw up their life just so they can experience some conflict. And that's what some people do. And so we've got to have this vision that's bigger than ourselves. And then we have those turbulent times, you know, realize that we're all the same and we're growing and we make mistakes and all that. And I think that, you know, what they say, what you focus on expands. And some people aren't even here in the present. They're focusing on their past failures, and we all have them.
Right.
But they're bringing that same energy into their present. They're infecting their present with their past, and they're not even here. They're missing out on their life. And their past, their life situation is just, they're just rerunning, you know, same relationship, same problem, year after year after year. And people say, most people, it's like they live the same year, like 30 years in a row. You know,
and they let that dictate the 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 34th year, and eventually you have to stop the cycle. Let me ask you one question to end. I want to throw you off base here. All right, we've been talking about sales and all this stuff. Let me ask you a question, because I think a lot of things in life is a sale, even if it's not a sale, like a sales call. Like everything's a negotiation. I remember hearing Chris Voss say that, you know, the famous FBI negotiator, Chris Voss. He said that like everything in life is a negotiation. Every interaction you have, almost everything you do, when it boils down to it, it's a negotiation. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. How would you take and just some, because if you're a salesperson, you can probably understand this. You have a better shot at understanding this stuff on a deeper level. But if you were to really simplify this, really break it down into some bullet point, simplified explanations on this, for those listening, if you are in because we talked about relationships a lot, or a little bit, I want to touch more on that. If you're in a relationship with somebody, and let's just say that you have very difficult communication, or maybe you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that is difficult to talk to, right? Or at least your perception is they're difficult to talk to, and maybe they're always angry, or maybe even you're the angry one, or you're both angry. What is the best way to use some of these communication skills to make the sale of getting along with your significant other?
That is a hard one to ask with the answer the one-liner.
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
I tell you this though, and we spent some time this weekend talking to me and my buddy talking about that book, The Way of the Superior Man. Have you read that book?
No.
David Data. Oh my God, you got
Way of the Superior Man.
Yeah.
All
so
right,
there's
write that down.
You know, there's these 3 levels of man that he talks about. One is this, you know, this bad boy kind of alpha guy, and that guy, you can't control him. He's very sexy. Even to men, he's the tough guy in the movie, and he can't be controlled. He's wild. And women even fantasize about him. Men even fantasize being like that, so like unattached. And, you know, he's kind of wild, and he says, F you, and I'll do whatever I want. He's like the rebel without a cause type of guy. He's mysterious and all that. He's the James Bond-ish type character. We fantasize about that. And that's a first level man. That's a low level man because he only cares about his own needs. A more conscious man is level 2 man, where he's like, what do you think? And he's like genuinely concerned. And maybe in a relationship with a woman, he says, well, you know, what do you want to do? Why don't, you know, let's hear your thoughts. And he is a more conscious man, but a woman will never be attracted to a man like that long term because he can't make a decision and he can never own her. And the third level man, he, much like the first level man, he's a bad one who knows what he wants and he makes decisions. But he'll be decisive and he'll tell you what to do, not to control you, but he'll take care of this. He'll make a decision so you don't have to. It's like, I've got this. There's this feeling of like containment and control. And so women, or even resistant clients, which are in their feminine kind of energy all over the place, what they're looking for is containment and control. There's a really amazing video on containment between females and male, like what women want. And some women would argue, if they see the video, they'll actually agree. It's a woman, Teal Swan is her name. She's like a YouTube celebrity, talking about how women want containment. And this relates to sales too. And people will challenge you. They'll challenge your boundaries to see if you are this level man. And so
in property, it's own as in own the moment or own the situation.
It's like we own each other. Like if you're hurting, I'm hurting.
Right.
Like I'm concerned.
You gotta be careful. It's 2021 was with the terminology.
I have responsibility for your feelings.
Right.
Over that, not in a controlling way, but also, and here's the analogy I always give as it relates to this masculine feminine dance. Have you ever been to San Francisco?
No.
Oh, it's an amazing city. Beautiful.
I was in a California airport once.
Yeah.
And that was it. So yeah. That's my Cali experience.
You've seen a picture of Golden Gate Bridge, and there's the Alcatraz in the middle, this harbor, and typically there's the Pacific Ocean, there's the Golden Gate Bridge, there's San Francisco here, there's Marin County over here, and there's this bay where boats come in, the fog comes in, the tide's up, tide's down. If you've been in San Francisco, for those of you listening, it can be 50 degrees and then it's 80 degrees and then it drops down to 40 degrees all on the same day. It's like this pocket of energy surrounded by these mountains. It's beautiful. It's chaotic. It's crazy. It's all over the place and it's unpredictable, much like a woman's emotions. Tide goes in and out. There's like just chaos in your company and this conversation, and a stressed out human being, there's chaos. And when we see that chaos, we often want to control. But if we control that energy, much like making a lake stagnant, it feels dead. The woman feels controlled and dead. And then there's a lot of other challenges. She buys into it. She doesn't feel alive, and she'll react and she'll want to do things, but or just challenge you too much, whatever it is. But the San Francisco harbor sees that energy, is connected to energy, but as it comes in with the ups and downs and all the craziness, it is firmly grounded and rooted, immovable, deeply rooted in the earth. And if you can be that, says, hey, it doesn't matter if you're crazy today, doesn't matter this, that, like I'm here to weather the storm and I'm immovable. I'm here for you. This is a place that you can come in and feel safe, but also not controlled. I'm never going to control. You can leave at any time.
I've read about this. It's called the shit test.
It is a shit test.
It's called the shit test.
People are doing that to us all the time. So your reactive client, all that. That's why it's so important to ask this. Seems like such a cheesy question, but what can I learn from this? What am I here to experience? What's driving this behavior? How do I speak behind the mask? And we've all got a mask. We've all got insecurities. We've all got fear. And somebody's in that moment, they have fear. And so in my way of communicating, I'm trying to put them at ease because I know they're just scared. Like when somebody's acting like that, relationship, business, that alpha client, hey, listen to me. They're saying, I'm scared. I'm scared shitless. And I want you to make me feel okay. And I say, hey, I'm here for you. And if they're going off on a tangent, I'll label it maybe a pattern, redirect. What are you really hoping to accomplish so we can meet some mutual direction or target of what they're wanting? And sometimes I can't support them. I'm like, look, I can't support you in that. Is that what you ultimately want? So, I'm clear about my own boundaries in all of my communication.
So basically, somebody in the interaction, relationship, sales, whatever, somebody in the interaction has to be stable in their emotions, has to be grounded. If you let the other person knock you off of your balance, and then it just goes back and forth, becomes chaos.
Two people, like this, this thing.
One person has to basically mean you're not bothered, because that's what I read about. Like the shit test was like, basically they want to give you shit and see if you can handle it and not get all imbalanced and butthurt about it, essentially, to really break it down to what it is. If you can show that you don't let it bother you, that's like the ultimate form of, I guess you could say, respect. Yeah. It's the other ultimate form to gain respect, to show that you're not bothered by it.
In a relationship also, that drama will come and the person saying, ultimately, I want your attention and I want to feel that I'm important to you, more important than that other thing. Can you make my needs very important? Can you make me feel seen, heard, and appreciated in this moment? And sometimes that will happen as you legitimately do have other things going on. And so sometimes just, saying, look, like, because you're so important to me, that's why I'm doing this, so that would it be okay? And just a hug or like a squeeze, a way to regulate that person's nervous system where they feel calm, and we transfer it. And not to go on too many tangents, but like a child, if it hears a thunderstorm and gets scared, the child will run and maybe hug the mother or hug the father. And that energy, that stress will go from the child to the parent and calm down the nervous system of the child. If the child does it and hugs the parent, and the parent has more stress than the child, the stress will go into the child. The child will never regulate its nervous system, and the child can be autistic or something like that. And so having a daily practice, meditation, breath work, whatever, a way to calm yourself down, get into state, to feel comfortable, to feel embodied, to be in your own body, whether I'm speaking on stage or, here, I want to be aware of my body, connected to my body. That's where your emotions are produced. And when you're in your head, you're dead. And so how do I be connected to myself and present? And I communicate with my being, not just with this mouthpiece.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome, man. So, and I love the fact that you said, I don't know if anybody missed this or not, but it's, and I don't want people to miss this, that just giving a hug sometimes and grounding that person. And because in a sense, a hug can be a pattern interrupt, and just giving them hey, give a hug. It can change. And I've seen that. I can see it change. And it's easier said than done, because sometimes you let what they say anger you, and then you're like, I don't want to give this person a hug. And but I mean, somebody has to try to, where not everyone is trying to do the same thing.
100%. So, well said.
Man, thank you so much for coming on. This has been like a whirlwind of awesomeness. I mean,
fun. It's just the time flew by.
Yeah, well, when we do these, sometimes they do fly by. My bladder is knocking on my door, but
okay.
that's dude, it's awesome. I'd love to have you back on sometime and talk again. And I think there's just so many nuggets. You'd probably give me more nuggets than anybody. I mean, there's like at least 100 things in this conversation that I think can be expanded upon and really change people's lives. So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your experience, coming up from your childhood, getting the job with Tony and all that stuff that you went through with that. I think it's an incredible story, and I think a lot of people have learned a lot from it. And I think everybody should go and hug their girlfriends and boyfriends right now.
Or parents.
or parents, kids. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, brother.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you are looking for daily success mentoring on how to succeed in life at whatever you do, you can go to howtothink.com and sign up and get a daily success mentoring audio delivered right to your phone on our app. And again, don't forget to subscribe. And please go follow Eli Wilde. Where can they check out your stuff?
We have a Facebook group. And that's pretty much where I direct people.
Okay. What's the name of it?
Elite Level Influence. It's a working name, ELI, Elite Level Influence. Eli. It's pretty cheesy.